People want a quick solution. The long-term solution here is to address the mental health issue.
And I hear our governor talking about mental health issues. We're always going to have mental health issues, but if we don't do something about the guns, the people killing guns, then we're going to continue to have the same thing happen.
A first responder on scene to the Allen, Texas outlet mall shooting is rejecting Governor Abbott's excuses for why there can't be more done about gun laws. So I'm going to get to several videos in this segment. I'm also going to break down yet another mass shooting. And while I'm not going to name names because I don't care to publicize the individuals that are behind this, I do want to give you some context about who this person is, what's in their background, the kind of views they espoused, because it helps to inform a lot of this and what's, been going on just generally. But first here, actually, before I even get to breaking down what happened in this shooting, the reason why I cover, even though as much as I hate covering these stories, and I often don't cover them, there's a lot of them I don't cover, I feel like because I am a Canadian, I can offer a bit of a different perspective than your typical, American news commentator, because we don't have this problem. Canada has issues, not perfect, but this issue we do not have, and we are right next door. So any excuses around, it's just the mental health. You don't think other countries have mental health issues? Oh, it's the culture, it's movies and video games. You don't think Canadians, Europeans play shooting games, watch action movies? The issue is the guns. The issue is a total lack of gun regulation. That's the problem. So let me first break down the story. As with CNN here, since I'm not going to read too much about this, but here are their points. 8 people were killed and at least 7 others wounded when a gunman opened fire at Allen, Texas outlet mall on Saturday. The shooter, who was killed by police outside the mall, has been identified as a 33-year-old man. The gunman was armed with an AR-15 style rifle. According to the source, investigators are looking into his potential extremist ties, which I'll get to more on in a second here. And the victims in the attack range in age from 5 to 61 years old. All right. And several more remain in hospital. Okay. I first want to show you this video here. So this is you're going to see an account from Steven Spainhauer. He was one of the first people that arrived there. He was there before the cops were there. His son works in one of the shops in the mall. And here's what he had to say about his experience.
First girl I walked up to was crouched down, covering her head in the bushes. So I felt for her pulse, pulled her head to the side, and she had no face.
But Spainhauer says he found a child that survived while covered by his protective mother who died.
And so when I rolled the mother over, he came out, and I asked him, "Are you okay?" And he said, "My mom is hurt. My mom's hurt." So rather than traumatize him anymore, I pulled him around the corner, set him down. He was covered from head to toe like somebody had poured blood on him.
It's that awful image that Spainhauer and others who witnessed the horror will be haunted by for the rest of their lives.
Because no one can see what they saw today and not be affected by it. It's not a situation that I would wish upon anybody, JD. It's just unfathomable.
I have a hard time even reading about this, hearing about these firsthand accounts. Can you imagine actually being in that situation? Can you imagine seeing what these people saw? I think oftentimes that's missed in these discussions around these shootings. It's not just about the victims. It's also about the impact on everybody involved. Whether you were injured, whether you're a family member of someone who was a victim, whether you were there yourself, whether you're responding to it and seeing all the carnage. This is the kind of experience that has a severe impact on people's mental health. Just someone being around the situation, let alone being actually in it. And still, this happens again and again and again. I'm not even sure how many mass shootings there were this year. It's impossible to follow at this point, but it's a regular occurrence. It's now a normal thing that happens. Only in America, by the way. Now, more on Spainhauer. So he his son was sheltered inside H&M. That's where his son worked. He says here, quote, "My son came out, and I want to tell you, to see your son come out with his hands over his head and have to walk past dead bodies, it's not something any parent or anybody should ever have to see or experience." He is now joining a growing chorus of people touched by gun violence across the country who are calling for meaningful gun control legislation. And I'm going to get to more from him in a bit here after I get to the Greg Abbott video. But a bit more on the shooter behind this, because this is also an important piece. He was wearing a tactical vest and also had a handgun. One of the senior law enforcement officials said more weapons and ammunition were found in his car. At the time of the massacre, he was wearing a patch on his chest that included the acronym RWDS. According to two senior law enforcement officials, authorities believe the letters stand for Right Wing Death Squad, a phrase used in far-right online spaces, one of the senior law enforcement officials said. So this is also part of the pattern of behavior we are seeing in a lot of these shootings in terms of their political views. But also, it's also important to point out, this is not just an issue in the U.S. This is an issue globally. These people exist all over the world. Yet they don't have easy access to firearms. They don't have easy access to a tactical vest. That's an American problem. A preliminary review of what is believed to be the shooter's social media accounts reveal hundreds of posts that include racially or ethnically motivated violent extremist rhetoric, including neo-Nazi material and material espousing white supremacy, two senior law enforcement officials said. All right. Now, let's get to Greg Abbott.
Abbott has expanded gun rights. He signed open carry legislation. He's allowed for weapons to be carried on college campuses and in places of worship. He's issued executive orders bolstering and encouraging the reporting of potential threats. And in 2020, Abbott signed a law that allows Texans to carry handguns without a license or training, as long as they aren't otherwise prohibited from carrying a gun.
So Texas Governor Greg Abbott has only made it easier to acquire a firearm in a state that already has a real issue with mass shootings. Let me get to what Greg Abbott is saying now on Fox News Sunday, where he is responding to the popularity of gun reforms, including with Republicans. So I'm going to pause throughout this, since there is a couple of things that, of course, he is lying through his teeth about. But here it is.
One state senator pointing the finger at you and the GOP there in Texas, saying there are loose and dangerous gun laws. I want to put up a poll that we just had on possible gun reforms here in the U.S. This is just out from Fox News. When you ask people what they would favor, background checks for guns, enforcing existing gun laws, legal age to 21, requiring mental health checks, flagging people for danger to self, all of those score at more than 80%. Are there things that you would consider in Texas, or that you think Congress should consider at a federal level along those lines?
Well, on the federal level, as you know, some laws were passed last year to begin to address this. At the state level, listen, this is something that we've been grappling with over the past year.
I should just note that the gun laws that were passed last year were widely criticized by people that want to see proper gun reforms. So it's not anywhere close to what is necessary in order to, help stop the frequent occurrence of these sorts of events.
And there are some potential easy solutions, such as passing laws that we're working on right now to get guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals and to increase penalties for criminals who possess guns. But Shannon, we need to recognize a reality. What we've seen across the United States over the past year or two, and that is an increased number of shootings in both red states and blue states.
Which, before it goes on, that's the perfect argument for federal gun laws, to do something on a national scale as opposed to doing this state by state. If there's shootings rising across the country, then it can't just be about what individual states are doing. Yet people like Abbott always argue for states' rights.
Shannon, we've seen an increased number of shootings in states with easy gun laws, as well as states with very strict gun laws. I think that the state in which the largest number of victims have occurred this year is in California, where they have very tough gun laws, where 11 people died. And so
Okay, this is so absurd. These are the same people. Abbott, I think even in this interview, talks about how this it's all getting so political. He is the one being political here by cherry picking an individual stat from 2023 as opposed to looking at the overall picture of states with terrible gun laws versus states with more restrictive gun laws, even though no state even comes close to what is necessary, because again, there needs to be national laws around this stuff. But this idea that somehow California is worse than Texas is so ridiculous and a bold-faced lie. Here is CNN with reporting a study here. States with weaker gun laws have higher rates of firearm-related homicides and suicides, study finds. So they go on to write here, a study published in January by a leading nonprofit organization that focuses on gun violence prevention found that there is a direct correlation in states with weaker gun laws and higher rates of gun deaths, including homicides, suicides, and accidental killings. The study by Every Town for Gun Safety determined that California had the strongest gun laws in the country. Hawaii topped the list with the lowest rate of gun deaths in the country, while Mississippi led the country with both the weakest gun laws and highest rate of gun deaths. There is a direct correlation here. Now, if you want to go deeper into this, you can. Here is their study. They rank all the states here. I will link to this below the video on YouTube under sources in the description box. Let's hear a little more from Abbott and where he puts the blame for these kinds of shootings.
one thing that we can observe very easily, and that is there has been a dramatic increase in the amount of anger and violence that's taking place in America. And what Texas is doing in a big-time way, we are working to address that anger and violence by going to its root cause, which is addressing the mental health problems behind it. We know that Texas had been lagging in addressing mental health for years, and that's why over the past 3 sessions, we've added almost $25 billion to address mental health. We're in the waning days of a session right now where we will be adding even more funding, about $3 billion, to address mental health needs in the state of Texas, especially in rural Texas, and especially for children in schools.
All right, so I don't know the specifics around what Texas is doing for mental health. I would be shocked if the Republican lawmakers in that state are doing anything substantial. That said, this is not the problem. Yes, fine, invest into addressing mental health, of course. Every country has mental health problems. Not every country has the mass shooting problem that America does. So to try and put the blame anywhere else, as I said at the beginning, and I'm going to get to a response here from that first responder in a minute on what Abbott said here. But to blame anything else is just incorrect and inherently political. They're the ones being political. Being like this idea that talking about gun reform is somehow it's turning, a mass shooting political. Why is the status quo not political? Why is doing nothing not seen as being political? If anything, that's being more political. Pretending an issue doesn't exist is inherently more political than actually trying to address the problem. Because in that case, you're actually just playing politics. You're just playing sides as opposed to looking at what the problems in society are and trying to do anything real to address them. Now, let me get to a response here from Stephen Spainhauer and what he thinks about Abbott's excuse.
We used to have an assault weapons ban nationally. We can do that at the state level. We can put red flag laws in place. We can limit high capacity rounds. Like I found a live round next to one of the deceased victims. We can stop putting some of these weapons like M4s and AR-15s in the hands of people who don't need them. And I hear our governor talking about mental health issues. We're always going to have mental health issues, but if we don't do something about the guns, the people killing guns, then we're going to continue to have the same thing happen. It could happen to your family. It could happen to anybody that's watching in any state, in any small town or big city. And until we take some definite actions Quit changing the narrative about it being just a mental health issue and start doing something about the guns.
There you go. It's not a mental health problem. This is a gun problem. Because if it was a mental health problem, then every single country in the world would be having the same problem with guns. And they're not. These stories, man, are so, I don't know, just very frustrating. They're frustrating, they're depressing, because how many times have I done a video on this stuff? How many explanations have I done? How many times have I broken down what Canada does in terms of gun laws? The restrictions. You can still own a gun in Canada, but there's a process. You have to register. There's a proper background check. There's a 30-day waiting period. They talk to your partner, past partners. They do proper checks. They ensure you're actually, there's training. Like, there's just some basic laws. You could still own a gun in America with those sorts of laws, but it would ensure that these firearms don't get into the hands of the wrong people on such a consistent basis that we are talking about a story like this every single week.